Back to our earlier story, Ivory Coast former Prime Minister Guillaume Soro is calling on his country's opposition to unite to prevent President Alassane Ouattara from winning a third term at elections next month. To discuss some of the politics at play in the Ivory Coast, we are joined by Kotchi Evariste, who is the Secretary General of the FPI party from the Ivory Coast. Mr. Evariste, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Good evening, sir. Thanks for having me.
Now, in your opinion, Mr. Kotchi, is the Ivory Coast ready for an election at the end of this month?
As I'm speaking to you, we cannot speak of a readiness for the elections. It's not possible. We are not ready because Alassane Ouattara himself doesn't want the election to be organized because there is a chaos at home, especially after the decision of the President of the Constitutional Council, Kone Mamadou, that declared that Alassane is a candidate for his third mandate in Côte d'Ivoire, which is not being accepted by the international community, cannot be accepted by the different opposition parties in Côte d'Ivoire. It cannot be accepted by the European Union. Believe me, now is ready for this election.
And a disputed election in 2010 led to a brief civil war that killed over 3,000 people. And since then, has there been enough stability to ensure that perhaps there is not a repeat of these events?
Of course, this is for preventing the repeat of the same event, the same conflict, that we don't want the election to take place. Because before even that, Alassane himself declared that he won't be a candidate for the third term. But why then, in the last minute, someone who publicly declared or announced on 5 March 2020 that he wouldn't run for his third term and that he wanted to transfer the power to a younger generation, all of a sudden decide or contradict himself, saying that he is ready for another term. While the Constitution, by means of the Article 35 of the old Constitution, by means of the Article 55 of the new Constitution, and by means of the Article 183, doesn't allow him to be a candidate for the presidential election, and will surprise the international and the national community that is ready for it, which is not possible. We cannot allow it because the Constitution doesn't allow it.
So, in short, you are disputing the Constitutional Court judgment?
The constitutional judgment must be discussed because it is null and void. Because the members of the Constitutional Court were held at gunpoint to render a decision that is not the one that they have decided to tell the population, to tell the nation, or to tell the international opinion. The army went into the premises of the Constitutional Court to hold them as hostages for them to say the will of the power, the will of Mr. Alassane Ouattara, which cannot be done in a democratic country.
So what seems to be the problem here, Mr. Evariste? Is it the Constitutional Court judgment itself, or is it how the president has misinterpreted that judgment to his own personal gain?
What I can tell you here is that both are linked. On the one hand, the president wants to play his own game, which is not the game of the Constitution. On the other hand, the moment when they were supposed to give the opportunity to the Constitutional Court to render its decision, Alassane Ouattara sent the military in the premises of the Constitutional Court to hold as hostages all the different members of this very respected council or court and ask them to tell the will of the president, that's the one of Alassane Ouattara. The reason why we declare as a democratic country that this cannot be done. It is like it's a military coup to the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire, using the soldiers that are actually being under the order of Mr. Alassane Ouattara.
Now, Mr. Soro, we've seen he's just urged the public and the opposition movement to unite against Ouattara. Just looking at the fragmentation in the opposition movement in the Ivory Coast, can the opposition do that? Can they unite? Is it really a united front?
First of all, what I can tell you about Guillaume Soro and the opposition in Cote d'Ivoire is the opposition is really united. Guillaume Soro has never departed from the opposition. Guillaume Soro went on a trip in France. He wanted to come home this year. Alassane Ouattara never allowed his plane to land in Cote d'Ivoire. Why? Because Soro was the spokesperson, the spokesman of the rebellion by then. I mean the years 2010, 2011, as from 2002. Some Bureau was the spokesperson or the spokesman of the rebellion. Now, there was a deal between Guillaume Soro and Alassane Ouattara. Soro Guillaume asked Alassane Ouattara, as I helped you, will you allow me to rule after your first 2 terms? Alassane responded, yes. But when the time came for Soro to rule, Alassane refused. Reason why Soro, for his safety, ran to France. But when he wanted to come back, Alassane never accepted him to enter his own country. Reason why now Soro is not a candidate for the election. President Laurent Gbagbo, who is innocent after the trial at the Hague Court, at the International Hague Court, was also declared innocent. Both of them went to apply. They went with all their files, all the documents that were required for a candidate to be accepted. All of them got rejected. But as I'm speaking to you, Guillaume Soro, in a sign of solidarity to the opposition of Cote d'Ivoire, has declared that as long as he is not a candidate for the election, there won't be any election in Cote d'Ivoire. Alassane will never be a president in Cote d'Ivoire again. This is what is prevailing in Cote d'Ivoire, for those who want to hear about the truth.
Mr. Evariste, now that the Constitutional Court has made this declaration, it does appear that all the aggrieved parties, including yourselves and the opposition movement in general, has been devoid of any opportunity to seek recourse. So now that they don't have any recourse, is taking to the streets and calling for mass demonstrations the only way to go?
Of course, this is the way to go, because when you are in a country where the population is being held as captives of a certain regime, and the constitution cannot speak, cannot prevail. The laws that Alassane himself actually has designed for the constitution. Remember that in 2016, Alassane Ouattara reshaped the constitution of Cote d'Ivoire. He's the one who said there will be no third mandate to any president who rules over the country. How come all of a sudden he declares that, based on himself, what he said, how can he change his decision immediately for his own selfish interest and declare that he wants to be a candidate for the third term, which is not actually what the Constitution wants any candidate to do? So the population, as I'm speaking to you, the country is like boiling. In the interior of the country, there have been many marches, many protests, many riots. The army or the police or the military police shot many people. The country is set for another civil war. We pray for the Lord not to allow this to happen. But as I'm speaking to you, no one will let Alassane do what he wants to do or do his will. The opposition is united against that. The population is set for putting barriers on the way for Alassane to become a candidate for the election. So we don't even speak about an election now. The election is out of question, is ruled out, because Alassane is not presidential.
Well, it suffices to mention, Mr. Evariste, that the country may be united against President Alassane Ouattara. The opposition may be united against President Ouattara. But then President Ouattara only has the constitutional judgment as his only trump card to proceed with the election. We've seen on Tuesday this week the African Court, which is a Pan-African human rights tribunal, calling on the Ivorian authorities to allow Mr. Guillaume Soro to contest the vote. Can this particular court overturn the Ivorian Constitutional Court or the Constitutional Court judgment?
As I'm speaking to you, the same Constitutional Court cannot declare anything else because Alassane Ouattara has already appointed the military to hold this very Constitutional Court as a hostage. And in addition to that, for information's sake, the African Court of Human Rights has also declared that the candidacy for a third term of Mr. Alassane Ouattara is null and void, and the same African court wants Soro Guillaume or allows Soro Guillaume to be a candidate for the election. So, as I'm speaking to you, Alassane is the one who is ruling all the different powers of the country. The executive, the judiciary, and the legislative is in his hands. No one must speak. If no one can speak, if you speak, believe me, either you will be abducted, because we are living under one of the most terrible dictatorships in Africa in this 21st century. This is the problem in Ivory Coast currently as I'm speaking to you.
All right, Mr. Evariste, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your analysis this evening. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure.
Indeed, that was the Secretary General of the FPI party, the Ivory Coast, Mr. Kotchi Evariste, giving us his analysis and update on the latest regarding developments coming out of the Ivory Coast. Remember that this week, the Ivorian Constitutional Court has banned 40 candidates from running on this year's election. This is The Globe on SABC.